Let's talk about Kadena, and let's talk about how Kadena's blockchain is going to start aligning incentives of legacy players, whether that's institutional investors, or maybe that's universities that want to leverage the power of Kadena's private or permissionless blockchain. When you start aligning incentives, meaning when your business motto is win and help win, because I help you win, I win together. I inherently make your business better. By you using my business, you make my business better. And that's what Kadena is. Kadena is a software. Now we're going to talk about aligning incentives, where maybe the United States and its allies want to leverage the power of being able to communicate in real time across the private or a permissionless blockchain that is more secure than anything that they're currently using. Kadena is designed with military grade encryption. It was literally designed for enterprise grade clients. You're gonna have two separate hospitals that wanna share medical records, but don't really have a convenient way to do it. Now there's this giant network that's super safe and secure, just as safe as Bitcoin. Proof of work's been battle tested. And Kadena's blockchain is actually quantum resistant because Kadena uses the Blake 2S algorithm, where Bitcoin still uses the SHA 256 algorithm. So super really unique concept. And I want you guys to listen to these directors at MIT and these people that are very, very smart talk about what's going to be possible when you start aligning incentives from two different countries, two different universities, two different giant healthcare facilities, stadiums, two different sporting teams that want to trade athletes, or fantasy football leagues, or anything of the sort. You got to think big, big, big picture, because that's what Kadena was designed for. Ready? Let's dive deep. But before we dive in, when you hear them say consortiums, what they're talking about of consortiums is different groups of people, but large groups of people that don't normally like working together. Big legacy players that maybe have been direct competitors, Apple and Microsoft, you normally try to bring the best minds into a room, into a consortium, and you kind of try to snowball ideas to make things better for everybody. But it's really hard to align these consortiums because they're big legacy players that have been working against each other for half a decade, 2 decades, 100 years, right? So they're normally not incentivized to work together. But sometimes when the cause is this great, maybe that's not the case.
And really, anyone who has sort of any insight here, are you finding that, what are the most interesting consortia? What are the incentives behind these consortia? Do you think that they'll last? Or is this, I've heard consortia referred to as a bunch of companies and competitors getting together to just basically spy on each other. So is that what's happening, or are we really getting productive work out of these consortia?
Do you want to go first?
All right. So we have a conflicting relationship with consortia because on the one hand, they show a lot of promise, but they also require people who have been competing against each other. When I say people, I mean corporations, that have been competing against each other for sometimes decades, if not hundreds of years, some of these companies. And so there's a strong disinclination to play nice with each other, even though it's often something that they all want. So we did a pilot for a consortium of healthcare companies, healthcare insurers, where they wanted to share doctor's office information. This isn't even HIPAA protected data. This is just insurance companies get fined if they don't know where their doctors are and who's taking what insurance and how many employees they have and all of this information. And right now, they each individually try to maintain this information, and they have these call centers that call the doctors, and the doctors hate it and the insurance companies hate it. And it was a perfect case for if everybody could just play nice and share their information, everybody could win. And it was a successful pilot in that it did work, and we got 5 companies to stand up and use it. And then when it went forward into who's going to maintain this, we're still on hold. So they have a lot of promise, but it's hard to get people to play nice. I'm not sure if you've seen.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And in fact, on that, if you remember this sort of solution shape slide I had at the end of my spiel, the middle category exactly falls into that space quite commonly. And I think it's worth stepping back a click and saying, the power source for change is value, and ultimately value to the end user, not value to the corporation as an objective and landing point. That's an interim state. We can debate whether or not it happens fast enough, that chain, but ultimately, I think that's a really fundamental point that says, if a group of people are working together, why would we do it? And we do it because we're frightened, maybe, but hopefully we do it because we can see around a vision that says, wow, look, there's new innovation, there's new product service, there's new opportunity here, as well as more mundane stuff, like there's a lot of efficiency gains, quite often your point about just admin. And frankly, look at the way we've automated so many processes in this world. I was telling a story to a friend the other night. If you could do a sort of spaceman in a satellite whizzing around the planet, just looking down on planet Earth, you'd be forced to think we must be crazy. I mean, we've just kind of automated in these vertical silos, and then we message between silos. We don't even do a very good job of automating within a silo. So there's a huge amount of intrinsic value, I think, in society at large for being more coherent in the way we use data. But then it starts to then click down into a consortium that says, okay, so if four of us are going to form a business, is an AI going to absolutely clean up and the three of us are going to end up being stuffed? Because guess what? That consortium probably won't work.
You're very untrustworthy.
So, well, maybe it will, actually. But
Technically, Microsoft and Apple may never want to work together, no matter how much it benefits Microsoft or how much it benefits Apple. But if they can work together and it benefits the end user. So if Kadena makes your user experience going to the doctors better because it's convenient, it's easier, you trust that your medical records aren't getting shared places that they shouldn't be shared, you can trust your third party, whether that's maybe accepting payments cheaper. So if Apple and Amazon can accept payments without charging you any additional fees, they most likely will want to leverage that technology because it'll make the end user experience better. Now, I want you guys to listen to the follow-ups on this one really quick.
But my point is that, and I find myself in this conversation almost daily, I'd say right now, it is once leaders in business or enterprise and government have reached a point of maturity where they understand what the technology might enable, and that's not a trivial step, by the way, and we're in a very asymmetrical landscape there, but once you get to that point, then you can get to the point where you say, okay, well, what is the value that we're talking about across the pool, and how is it distributed? Is it asymmetrically distributed? Because it usually is. In which case, how much do we care? Because we may not care, and it's worth having that conversation very early on. I'm never going to let you win. So, well, let's all go home then. And by the way, some other group in your sector may well work it out. So I think the word incentives is a very interesting one that you coined, because it's one I see over and over again right now, and it's worth us leading the conversations very quickly with what's the value story, how's it distributed across the group, and how we're incentivized to change.
So here he's talking about the value proposition. For example, say the UK government totally understands what Kadena's technology is capable of, but they choose to not interact with it. They choose to ignore it, right? If the value proposition is so good that they are going to be worried that the United States or another government might start to leverage that technology and take full advantage of it, they might be incentivized based out of fear alone that they might be missing out. When a technology is this great, for example, the internet was a perfect example. How many countries underestimated the power of the internet? And now who controls the internet? And how much power has control of the internet given to the United States? Taking a look at something like Kadena, who's going to see the full potential in Kadena first? If me, on my level, can fully start to wrap my head around and visualize and help present and teach you guys what potential something like Kadena might have, what do you think the smartest people in the world, MIT professors, universities, large legacy players in the medical fields, what do you think that they're going to see in Kadena?
Yeah, exactly. I think we've had, especially in the technical world, we've had so much discussion around the incentives of these open, public, permissionless networks. What are the incentives? Do you use mining? Do you have validators? What do they earn? But I haven't seen as much of a story about the incentives in these consortia networks in particular. And I think that's going to be really key to figuring out how they work. Just to put in a plug, I think some economists at MIT are starting to really dig into this question. It's very much a sort of operational sort of question. Are there any examples that are really working, especially, let's say in the blockchain space, but also outside the blockchain space, where competitors have come together? The DTCC is one example, one could say, where competitors have come together and it's really working, they're driving value. What are the best examples of this?
Well, I referenced the Reciproc Alliance. I actually think we're going to see a really interesting set of stories this summer. There are two use cases that are applicable across nearly 40 large insurance companies in the US. This is an example of where they have cooperated. And effectively, they've got two specific examples. One is a proof of insurance, and one's a sort of initial claim type.
Now, this is going to be an example of where two big legacy players were heavily incentivized to save themselves time, energy, money by working together. And this is just one small example. And you can really start to see the wheels turning in your head when you're like, wow, okay, I now start to see why so many legacy players are going to be incentivized to utilize the Kadena blockchain.
Let's say in the blockchain space, but also outside the blockchain space where competitors have come together. The DTCC is one example, one could say, where competitors have come together and it's really working, they're driving value. What are the best examples of this?
Well, I referenced the Risk-Block Alliance. I actually think we're going to see a really interesting set of stories this summer. There are 2 use cases that are applicable across nearly 40 large insurance companies in the US. This is an example of where they have cooperated. And effectively, they've got 2 specific examples. One is a proof of insurance, and one's a sort of initial claim type example. They've configured a whole set of functionality now on a blockchain-based solution that each of those insurers are going to use. And they'll adopt it as a club. And it'll reduce administrative costs. It'll enhance customer service. I think it's going to be a really interesting use case or demonstrator of how that incentive can work. That the cooperation can work even between people that are intrinsically competing with each other. So I can see that coming alive this summer.
Okay, great. So insurance, everyone should take a look and watch out. Come to fruition. So how do we think about this? How do we think about the space moving forward? What have we learned?
Joy, I'll try and be brief. My closing slide is where I start on that topic, which is I think there's a giant learning curve right now, especially outside labs and outside innovation functions in government and in corporations. So go to somebody who's running a department who's got a quarterly reporting requirement or a customer obligation of some kind, and say, "Tell me about blockchain," and they'll go, quite often. I mean, there will be then obviously some at the other end of the spectrum. My point is there's almost a classic distribution of that expertise. And until we've got enough people at a level of maturity that are saying, okay, I can see pros and cons and I can see why I might want to play. And crucially, I can see how I might start to play. Because that's another thing we haven't talked about here is intrinsically, we're talking about joining things up that are currently fragmented or joined through elastoplast and flying pigeons and stone tablets. So we're joining things up, but where do you start? Because if you try and boil an ocean preemptively, guess what? It doesn't work. So that's quite a hard exam question in its own right. Once you've got to that level of a grown-up conversation, if you like, that says, yeah, I understand what this technology can do. I understand how it can work. I can understand how it can add value. I can understand who I have to compete and cooperate with at the same time, which, by the way, is every day in every business. It's not unusual, I think. Now, what should we do? And I was talking about this with my daughter. The next generations of Imagineers who are deeply tech literate, but that can then apply that and make it real, have got a playground like no other to play in, because they've got such an appalling starting position with the way we've applied technology in government and commerce so far, in my opinion.
Yeah, very true. So maybe in 2016 we underestimated the amount of learning that really needed to happen at all layers.
Right.
Dan and Monica, closing statements, answers to the question.
To the question of...
just given where we are in 2016, now here we are in 2019. What have we learned?
Yeah, so I think it's definitely been sobering. There's some kinds of progress that are just sort of happening more or less organically, and not necessarily that related to the level of hype, which is just like steady progress on Bitcoin Core, just getting more stable. Although of course you have seen some critical 0 days on it. Just sort of progress on developer tools getting better, but also just more and more people being aware of and buying Bitcoin and Ether. I think there's most of you tune out basically all of the hype. And if you just sort of watch the progress I think it's people talk about the crypto space goes very fast. I think it goes very slowly. And a lot of it is because people are sort of running around in circles and there's a lot of duplicated effort. But sort of inevitably, I think you're going to see at least some of the problems just sort of solved, not even on like a 5-year time scale, but like a 20-year time scale. And so then inevitably we're going to see something sort of very profound happening. But yeah, I have no idea what it'll be.
That was pretty painful to listen to somebody try to explain where Ethereum's going to be in a couple of years. And that was him trying to explain what we've learned about technology, because what we've learned basically points to the fact that Ethereum cannot scale. We've learned that proof of stake blockchains are just inherently centralized by nature. So it's funny when you hear somebody try to recap what we've learned about blockchain technology from Ethereum, because you can't really point out what we've learned, because what we've learned is the fact that it can't scale. So it's kind of funny when these guys are like, and we, swing down and watch this entire interview, and you'll really start to understand it's very hard for me to sit back and watch this industry and watch people like Kevin O'Leary and Raoul Paul and some of the quote unquote smartest guys from Wall Street come into this industry, because they get a lot of attention and a lot of clout from the cryptocurrency community because they're big celebrities coming into the crypto space. People start thinking that, wow, these guys did it on Wall Street, they're going to do it in crypto, but they're not really realizing how complicated and complex blockchain is. And to these guys off Wall Street, they don't understand what they're even looking at here. So until you really start to dive in and trust the owner, trust your research, you're not going to see what everybody else is missing.
If I knew what it would be, I would be go off, building it.
Or investing in it.
I guess or investing in it. Shoot.
Monica.
That's the funny part, is Kadena knew, right? Kadena's been building it since 2016. The world has known, the space has known. But in order to build it on this scale, to build a blockchain that can support billions of users on a global scale that has infinite scalability, you would have had to spend 5 years rewriting and creating and designing the most advanced coding language, not just the most advanced, safest and most secure smart contract coding language in the history of the world. And if you weren't willing to spend those 5 years, you wouldn't be able to scale blockchain technology.
Close us out before we move on to the break.
All right. I think I'm going to call 2019 as the year of the launch.
Oh, okay.
We've had projects, we've had networks, we've raised a lot of money, get a lot of engineers supposedly building stuff. 2019, if you can't launch, if you can't put up, I don't want to hear you talking on stage.
So this is it. Get your product out in 2019.
This is it.
Or get
We're
off
finally going to see real projects, real value, real launch. And,
Good, well said.
Yeah, great.
How about it?
Well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have. Thank you so much, Monica, Dan, and Simon, for being here with us. Let's thank our speakers.
Mic drop. We're Kadena. Come build with us. We're building the future. You don't see a blockchain like Kadena attracting the talent that it's attracting for no reason. We've just saw them onboard Tyler, Paul Su. These are all great, intelligent minds, probably some of the smartest in the industry, all starting to come together and pool their mental resources. You're attracting the smartest minds on a global scale because you've took time, and these people are set for life. They don't want I don't think a lot of them are coming to Kadena because they want to make all this money. I think the smartest minds are coming to Kadena because they want to help revolutionize the world and be a part of something great. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this type of content. If you guys could do me a favor, hit that like, hit that subscribe button. I appreciate you guys. Shout out to the Kadena community. Love you guys. Can't wait to see you guys in the next video. Peace.